Welcome to Module 1, Getting Started with Grants. In this module, we'll cover three objectives. Objective 1.1, to identify the characteristics of grants. Objective 1.2, describe the steps in the grant process. And Objective 1.3, identifying possible grant sources. For Objective 1.1, identifying characteristics of grants, first of all, what are grants? Grants are really a non-repayment revenue source to support your group with projects or programs targeted at meeting the grant agency's purposes. Grants are much different from sponsorships, donations, fundraisers, or membership fees, which are other sources of revenues. The grants are in essence designed to meet the specific objective of the grant agency. So, as we start to prepare our grant and to look at our projects, we need to know and match our project or initiative up with those of the purposes and objectives of the grant agency. Some of the characteristics of grants are that they also have eligibility criteria. So when you look to a grant, you should be able to go in and check out some prospective grants by looking, and asking yourself, do I meet the eligible criteria for this program? They are usually either online, or you can get that information from often the grant program coordinator administrator. Another characteristic is that the grants will often have or will carry a deadline date. Some of those may be at different times within the year for it. They may have a couple of different fall or spring sort of deadline that they'll use, but that information will be available to you, and it's critical that you meet that deadline for any grant that you may be applying for. You may have the best grant prepared in the world for a proposal, but if you miss the deadline, you're not going to be receiving funding for that application. The other characteristic of grants, which is different from most other types of revenue source, is that there's often a contact person or a program administrator for that grant that you can tie into, create a relationship with, and be able to run some of your initial initiatives or purpose of your project through to see how does that fit with their criteria, and to help you to look to refine your actual grant submission. Remember that grant individuals and grant agencies want to have good grants because they want to help you to achieve their objectives as well. Some of the characteristics or some of the things you need to be aware of is that many grants have certain expenses that they will deem eligible, and others that may or may not be considered eligible within your grant proposal. Talk with the contact person or the program administrator to have that discussion prior to ever submitting your grant. Also, many grants only provide a certain percentage of the project funding, so you'll need to get a sense of where my other funds and revenue sources going to be coming from my project as you start to develop your budget and as you think you will move forward. Grants also have usually an obligation that you have to complete the grant, and part of that is often a reporting mechanism at the end of it to say what grant was done, how was the project completed, what were the results of it, etc. You also need to find out what the payment schedule may be for your grant, because often with grants you'll receive a upfront payment and then not the final payment until such time as you have done the actual reporting on the initiative. So it may mean as an organization you need to be aware of how you're going to carry the remaining cash flow depending on what that grant was and the amount of it until such time as you get your final payment. And the other main characteristic is you are doing a project or initiative with most grants that you have an obligation to complete. And if you have a situation at any point in time where you need to change what your original proposal was, make sure that you touch base with the contact for the program, the administrator, to talk about those changes to make sure that they are still going to be fit within the eligibility and within the program guidelines that they have within the organization before you go ahead and make those and hope that your project will now still remain eligible. So that really concludes the major characteristics of grants. We'll soon be moving into the next part of this module, which will look at describing the steps in the grant process.